Hi there everyone. Today we're going to take a deep dive look at Kalman filtering. Now, unlike simple low-pass filters and notch filters, I've always felt that the Kalman filter was a bit mysterious. Before I started researching for this video, I didn't really understand exactly how the Kalman filter worked and how it behaved differently to something like a static low-pass filter or a notch filter. Well, today I'm going to be taking you through exactly what the Kalman filter does, how it works, the mathematics behind it, and also looking at the different implementations of the Kalman filter in Emuflight and iNav. So there's no time to waste. This is going to be quite a technical deep dive, so let's get right into it. We have to start by asking the question, what is a Kalman filter? Well, a Kalman filter is a type of predictive filter. It combines a prediction of the state of a system based on some internal model of the system, and it combines that with measurements of the system taken by sensors like accelerometers and gyros and things like that. The nice thing about the Kalman filter is that its output can be more accurate than either the model or the measurements could be alone. And because of that, it finds all sorts of uses in guidance, navigation and control applications, and in some firmwares for our quadcopters as well. I think that the best way to explain exactly how the Kalman filter works is by using an example and taking you through how the Kalman filter is working on a particular system. Now, in this example, I'm going to use this car, which is driving along a road. The model parameters, the parameters that we're going to be filtering using the Kalman filter, are the speed, the position, and the acceleration of the car. And the measurements that we're going to use as inputs to the Kalman filter is a measurement from an accelerometer, giving acceleration, and a GPS position measurement. Here's how the Kalman filter works. We start at time t0. And at that time t0, we have an estimate for the position of the car, an estimate for the speed of the car, and an estimate for the acceleration of the car. And we also have a calculation which gives us the uncertainty of those estimates, how sure we are about those three parameters. And the goal is to get to time t1, the next time step in the control loop, in the PID loop, with a new estimate for the position, a new estimate for the speed, a new estimate for the acceleration, and also a new calculation for the uncertainty of those three parameters. The way we get there is through two steps. The first step is the prediction step. And in this step, we use the estimates of position, speed, and acceleration to predict what the position, speed, and acceleration will be one time step later. So we use the estimates from t0 to predict what the parameters will be at t1. And we also calculate the uncertainty of that prediction, how unsure we are about that prediction, based on our uncertainties about our existing state, t0, and also our uncertainty about the process in general. We also have these measurements. So we measure acceleration and we measure the position of the car as well. And we also calculate the uncertainty of those measurements. So you can see where this is going. We have a prediction of what we think should happen, and we have a measurement. And we know they're both wrong, and we're uncertain about both of them. So what we do is we combine the two predictions together based on their relative uncertainties to come up with this new estimate. And this means that our estimate is likely to be better than either the prediction that we made here or our measurements. And that new estimated position, speed, and acceleration of the car are going to be not only better than either the prediction or the measurements, but actually they're also going to be less uncertain as well. So our estimate will be better and also we'll be less uncertain about it. So let me take you through how this works step by step. So here we are in step one, the prediction step. So we're not going to be using any measurements for this. we're only going to be using the current estimated state of the system. So we know an estimate of the speed, an estimate of the position, and an estimate of the acceleration of the car at time t0. And if we know these things, we can predict what we think the position will be based on these parameters. So our current position is going to be our previous position plus our speed times the time step plus a half of the acceleration times the square of the time step. Our current speed is going to be our previous speed plus acceleration times the time step. And we also need to make an assumption about acceleration. And that assumption is going to be that the acceleration of the car doesn't change between the two time steps. So our current acceleration is the same as our previous acceleration. These equations allow us to use the current state of the system to predict what the state of the system will be at time t1. But not only do we have to make a prediction, we also have to calculate the uncertainty of our prediction. And the Kalman filter does this by propagating the uncertainty that's inherent in the previous state forward using those prediction equations. So remember that we know the uncertainty of our previous state because we calculate that. And then we propagate that forward through the prediction equations. It then adds to this a process uncertainty which takes into account the unpredictable effects on the system between time steps. So the effects on the system that aren't being modeled by the Kalman filter. So in this case, we made an assumption of constant acceleration. Well, if the acceleration wasn't constant, then that would be an unpredictable effect. And so that's why we have this extra term to take account of these unpredictable effects. And we propagate this previous state forward using matrix multiplication. And the way this matrix multiplication works is we create this F matrix using the equations that we're doing the prediction with. So you can see here that for position on this top row, we have current position equals previous position, so that's just a 1, plus the speed times time, so that's why we have a t there, and then a half t squared times the acceleration, so that's why we have a half t squared here. The second line of the equation has the current speed equals the previous speed plus acceleration times time, so previous speed is just a 1, acceleration times time, just t, and we have acceleration, the current acceleration equals the previous acceleration, so that's just a 1 as well. And this allows us to create our F matrix, and it's based on the prediction equations. We then multiply the uncertainty from our previous time step, PT-1. We pre-multiply by F and we post-multiply by the transpose of F, and that effectively propagates the uncertainty in that previous state forward to the next time step. So whatever our uncertainty was in t-1, we propagate that forward to give us an uncertainty of our prediction. And we add to that uncertainty of the prediction this Q, this process noise, which is due to unpredictable effects. So we have the uncertainty of the prediction and the uncertainty caused by these unpredictable effects. And that gives us the uncertainty of the whole prediction step, which here is called PT. So we've now calculated not only a prediction of what the car will be doing in the next time step, we also know how uncertain we are about that prediction as well. So once we've done our prediction, we can look at our measurements, and we're going to have a measured acceleration, a measured position, and we're also going to need an uncertainty about those measurements. We need to know how certain or uncertain we are about that measurement of acceleration and that measurement of position. So for the measurement step, we don't use the model parameters. We just have the output from the sensors. So we have the output from the accelerometer and the output from the GPS. And that gives us a measurement of acceleration, and a measurement of position. Similar to the prediction, we also need to calculate the uncertainty in our measurements. And if we assume that any noise on the measurements is going to be random, we can estimate the uncertainty of the measurement using something called autocovariance. And what autocovariance describes is how well any individual measurement from the sensor correlates to what the average measurement of the sensor would be if you measured that system multiple times. So for example, let's look at position measured by GPS, and let's look at the covariance of that. So as you can see here, if we were to take many GPS measurements of the car, it would never be exactly right. Every measurement would be in a slightly different location. But the average of all the measurements, if we were to take a huge number of them, would be exactly where the car is. And what autocovariance is telling us is how well does each of these individual measurements correlate to the true position of the car. Obviously, the further away from the true position all of these measurements are, then the larger the autocovariance and the more uncertain the GPS measurement is. If, however, all of these GPS positions were exactly where the car is, then the autocovariance would be very small and we would be very certain about the measurement of position provided by the GPS. And this method makes use of the fact that when you have random errors, over a period of time, all of these random errors will average out to 0. And we can calculate this autocovariance using this equation, where each of these xt minus 1, etc. are measurements of the position of the car in this case at different moments in time. So t minus 1, t minus 2, these are just different moments in time when we're measuring the position of the car. And the mean here is the mean of what we would expect to get for lots of measurements taken at that time. So in a sense, the true position of the car. And you might recognize this as quite similar to the mean of a sum of squares. So you may have spotted a problem here, which is that we need to estimate the true position of the car in order to calculate the autocovariance. But we only have one measurement at each time step. So we can't take lots of measurements and average them together to find the true state, because we only get one measurement and then the car changes position between one measurement and the next. Well, there is an approach that we can use to get around that. And the way it works is we create a register of W measurements of the position of the car by just recording what we measured for the position every time step as the car is driving down the road. And then what we do is we average them all together. So we have some position estimates from a little while ago, and we have the current position measurement, and we average all of the position measurements together between the two. And that actually gives us quite a good estimate of the position in the middle of the register in terms of time. So let's say this is time 0 and this is 10 seconds ago. Well, if we average all of the positions between now and 10 seconds ago, that's probably a pretty good estimate for where the car was 5 seconds ago. So that's what we have now, is an estimate of the position of the car 5 seconds ago using all the information between now and 10 seconds ago. And then we can use that in our autocovariance formula. So we can take the measured position of the car 5 seconds ago and subtract the estimated position that we made by averaging together all the measurements. And then we can multiply that by the next time step. So 5 and a bit seconds ago and the mean from 5 and a bit seconds ago. And we can work back. And this then allows us to calculate the covariance as the mean of the squared errors for all the entries in the register where we have an estimate of the true state. So all of the entries in the register before time t minus w over 2. So now we have a predicted position, speed, and acceleration, and an uncertainty of that prediction. And we also have the measurements, the measurement of acceleration and the measurement of position. And we also have an estimate for the uncertainty of those measurements. And so we can now do step 2, which is updating the model, where we combine our prediction with our measurements based on the relative uncertainty of the prediction and the measurements. So how are we going to do that? Well, we need to combine all of these parameters, the predicted speed, position, and acceleration, and we also need to take into account the measured acceleration and the measured position as well. Let's use the position of the car as an example, because this all works the same mathematically for all the parameters. So we can just look at one parameter to understand how the process works, and then that process is what's being applied to all the parameters. So we can estimate our position as being somewhere in between our predicted position and our measured position, somewhere along this grey line here. If we think our measurement is good, but our model is poor, so we have low uncertainty in our measurement and high uncertainty in our prediction, then we're probably closer to the measured position than the predicted position. If, however, we think that the measurement is very uncertain, but our model, our prediction is quite good, we should probably pick a point here and we rely more on the predicted position. If I stretch out that grey line and plot the predicted position and its uncertainty as a bell curve, and the measured position and its uncertainty as a second bell curve, then you can see that the estimate for the true position, or the best estimate for the position, is going to be somewhere in between the two, and it's going to be closer to the value with less uncertainty and further away from the value with more uncertainty. And it turns out that this is just a weighted average based on the relative trustworthiness of the predicted position and the measured position. That gives us our best estimate for the position that's going to be used in the Kalman filter. So now that we have our new estimate of position, speed, and acceleration, that's a combination of the measurements and of our prediction. We still have one final step, which is to calculate the uncertainty in our new estimate. And the way we do this is we take the weighting factors for the estimated values and create this matrix K. So K is composed of these little k values, where let's look at position as an example. If the little k for position was 0, that would mean that we were only using the prediction. If the little k for position was 1, that would mean that we were only using the measurement. So if k is a half, then we're using half of the measured value and half of the prediction to combine them together. So we create this matrix that has these k values in. Notice that k is 0 for speed because we don't have a measurement of speed. So we're going to be using the prediction the whole way. And we also have a matrix H, which is the mapping between the measurements and the model parameters. So if we weren't measuring the same variables that are in our model, then this H would be quite a complicated matrix. But it's simple for us because we're directly measuring position, we're not measuring speed at all, and we're directly measuring acceleration. So the mapping is very simple, it's just 1-to-1. If we have this matrix K and matrix H, then we can create this updated estimate of uncertainty, PT star, from our estimate of our prediction for the current time step PT, and we just do the identity matrix minus KH. The matrix maths isn't really that important here. What's important is that what we're left with is a new estimate for our position, a new estimate for speed, a new estimate for acceleration, and an estimate of the uncertainty of that state. And so what we've done is we've gone from our estimates at time t0 to our new estimates at time t1 by combining a prediction and some measurements together in an optimal way to give the resulting estimate that has the least uncertainty. So what the Kalman filter does is it's like an optimal predictor. So what the Kalman filter is it's an optimal estimator. It's trying to find the best estimate for all of the variables, position, speed, and acceleration in this case, based on all the available information from the previous state of the system at t0 and some new measurements taken. And from that, it calculates the optimal estimate of the current state of the system. And not only that, but it also calculates its uncertainty in those estimates. So now that we understand exactly how the Kalman filter works, how is this different from Betaflight PT1 filters? For any one variable, we can rewrite the Kalman filter update equation as this new estimate equals the prediction plus the weighting factor times the measurement minus the prediction. And this small k here is the same k that we put into that k matrix. It's that weighting factor. If k is 0, then we're just using the prediction. And if k is 1, then we're just using the measurement. The k factor is, as I said before, calculated from the covariances of the measurements and the model as before. But this is almost identical to the PT1 filter equation, where we have an A factor, which is determined from the cutoff frequency. So in the PT1 filter equation, the new estimate is the old value plus some weighting factor A times the current measurement minus the old value. And what this means is that the Kalman filter acts very much like a PT1 filter, but it has this constantly changing cutoff frequency, this constantly changing K value. So the best comparison is therefore between the Kalman filter and the dynamic PT1 filter in Betaflight. Now, the Kalman filter will filter more when the gyro signal is changing slowly and when you're doing smooth flying. And it's going to filter less during very sharp movements. And the reason for this is that when you're doing very sharp movements, the prediction for the Kalman filter is likely to not be very good. And so it's going to be relying more on the gyro data. However, when you're flying very smoothly, the prediction of the Kalman filter is likely to be more accurate. And so it's going to rely more heavily on that prediction and is going to ignore whatever noise is on the gyro. Now, because of the way that we're calculating these covariances, it takes time for the cutoff to change. Remember that we had to wait to get lots of measurements together to average to calculate the covariance. So there's going to be a time lag. And that means that this changing filter cutoff is going to lag behind quick movements and may not be fast enough to respond quickly to prop wash. So it's not probably going to be able to change its filter settings quickly enough to adjust for very quick events like prop wash. And that's a negative of the Kalman filter. In comparison, the dynamic PT1 filter in Betaflight, it filters more when the throttle is low and it filters less at higher throttle. And that's typically what you want most of the time. The effective filter cutoff changes instantly with throttle, so there's no lag. And this is because Betaflight doesn't have to wait and average measurements together to work out what the cutoff should be. It knows what your throttle setting is, and that's going to set the filter cutoff. This means that it's going to cope well if your event, like your prop wash event, happens to coincide with a sudden change in throttle, which actually is often the case for prop wash. You tend to be falling and then you'll apply throttle, and that will be when you get the prop wash event. So that works pretty well. However, it's not going to be able to cope with prop wash events that occur at low throttle, because it's going to be filtering more at low throttle. So this is something to be aware of. The two filters are very similar. They both are effectively first order filters. It's just that the way in which they change their cutoffs is different. At the end of the video, I want to take a moment just to talk about the implementations of the Kalman filter in Emuflight and iNav. It's important that you as pilots are aware that neither Emuflight nor iNav have a pure implementation of the Kalman filter as I've described it here and as it's described in the Wikipedia article on Kalman filters, for example, and in other places. And also that the two implementations of the Kalman filter are very different from each other as well. Some key differences which will matter is that the covariance value, which is typically a squared value for the Kalman filter, has been square rooted in both Emuflight and iNav. The covariance calculation for the prediction step doesn't consider the equations being used to do the prediction. So we talked about this F matrix, which is to do with the equations that you're using to predict, and that you propagate the uncertainty through those equations. So how the uncertainty of the state converts to the uncertainty of the prediction is coupled to what equations you're using. Emuflight and iNav don't consider this at all. The prediction step in Emuflight is scaled by the Kalman gain. That's not something you would see in a typical Kalman filter at all. And also the covariance of the gyro is used to scale the covariance of the process. Now, there's no reason why the covariance of the gyro should be linked to the covariance of the process. So in a traditional Kalman filter, you wouldn't use one variable to scale the other because they're quite independent of each other. The set point in iNav is used to scale the process covariance. Again, you wouldn't typically see that in a traditional Kalman filter. If the set point should appear anywhere, it should be appearing in the prediction step. It shouldn't really be appearing in the covariance because the set point is affecting the prediction model. The autocovariance in both Emuflight and iNav is calculated using the value minus the average all squared, rather than using subsequent time steps multiplied together, which is what you would typically use for covariance. Now, this might simply be an optimization, and because our time steps are very close together, the difference between xt minus mu squared and xt minus mu times xt minus 1 minus mu are probably very small. But that is a difference from the implementation that I've described here. I hope you enjoyed that really technical deep dive into Kalman filtering. If you have any questions or comments on anything that I presented in the video, or on Kalman filters in general, please leave them down below. And as always, I'm going to do my very best to respond to as many as I possibly can. If you like videos like this and want to support the channel, then the easiest thing you can do is to subscribe and like the video. I know it seems like a small thing, but it means a lot. If you'd like to go that extra mile, I do have a Patreon. You can join from just a few dollars a month, and it'll give you access to my Discord server, where you can ask me questions about Kalman filters or anything else in FPV. We've got a really lovely community there now, and I'd really love for you to join us. If you're in the market for some FPV related clothing, particularly in the run up to Christmas, you might like to check out store.aosrc.com. There are t-shirts, jumpers and hoodies on there with different exploded designs of AOS frames, showing the internal components, showing the screws and standoffs, and how all the frames go together. It's like a build guide on a t-shirt. If you like this more technical design, I'll put a link to that down in the video description. That's all I have for you for today. So until next time, I wish you all very, very happy flying.